Blah 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 blah. Hello everybody and welcome to I'll Tell You What TV, the unofficial F1 podcast, where tonight we're going to be talking about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the final race of the season, which means it's probably our final F1 podcast of this year. Joining me at the moment is Steve. James isn't with us yet, he's not been feeling too well, but hopefully he will join us a little later this evening. And we have given a quick shout out to Ray to see if he wants to come and join us. But Steve, how are you this evening? You well?
I'm not too bad. I was tempted to sit here and say nothing.
Oh, that would not go down well. It's hard enough. Could it be hard enough with just the two of us? With just the one of us, there's not much of a conversation. Don't be a twat.
It was an interesting race to finish on with this season, even though a lot of it kind of doesn't really mean much for a lot of the drivers.
Well, you say that. I've been trying to work out over the last couple of days what I made of the race, and I kind of summed it up halfway through and then at the end. I think it started really exciting, and not just because of Hulkenberg's rollover, but we will get on to that. I thought the whole race started really exciting and then died off in the middle of the race.
Yeah, well, you say middle of the race, but I think it died off for me when Charles Leclerc decided to pit early on, when Hamilton did under the virtual safety car, the safety car. Sorry, I think that just, I don't know, it took him out of contention, didn't it?
It did. I mean, I was gonna talk about that as well, so that's going to be one of the things that we can talk about. But I mean, the race threatened to get exciting again towards the end of the race, but then nothing happened. But what I will say is there was some really good racing lower down the field towards the end of the race, or the middle sort of third, not the middle third, the last third of the race, with I did make a note of who it was, but there was Van Dorn in there with Ocon. It was very exciting. So we have got a few bits to talk about. I mean, okay, you mentioned about Leclerc there. Interestingly enough, I've been sort of praising him quite a lot this season, saying I think he is effectively best of the rest. Well, Nico Hülkenberg has finished 7th in the Drivers' Championship, so he is officially best of the rest. I was surprised that Leclerc, even though he's had a really phenomenal season, I think, his points situation is not particularly that impressive at the end of the season. Well, I say that, it's not what you'd think. He's finished in 13th place on 39 points. He's been phenomenal. Hülkenberg had 69 points, so he was 30 points behind Hülkenberg. I mean, there's a few drivers. I mean, for the drivers that are lower than Leclerc, you got Grosjean, Gasly. Those two is a little bit of a surprise, but then Gasly's had a difficult season with reliability. Then you got Van Dorn, Ericsson, Stroll, Hartley, and Sirotkin, and those 5 are expected to be down there, to be honest. So yeah, so for me it was a little bit of a surprise. But you mentioned about the pit stop. Now it's interesting because when Hamilton pitted, I think it was potentially the right call for Hamilton because it was pretty much a free pit stop.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Sauber, it was too soon in the race for them to do it with Leclerc because he went from being in 4th place to 14th place and was stuck.
He got swallowed up by the pack, whereas Hamilton was in and amongst cars that were travelling at the same pace as him. So it didn't affect his race pace, whereas Leclerc's pace was affected dramatically.
Yeah. I mean, I do know that after the race, Leclerc did say that him and the team were not, they didn't know what to do, to be honest. When it came to making the decision, I think there was quite a bit of confusion. They didn't know which would be the right decision. Turns out the one they went with, although it wasn't a bad idea, it was just the wrong idea. If they'd have just waited and pitted at a normal point, he'd have been fine. But
when you think about the cars that failed to finish, like Raikkonen,
yeah,
he could have been.
He could have had a podium,
4th or 5th, or even a podium. Yeah.
Well, he could have had a podium, and the reason I say that he could have had a podium is because he was battling with Danny Ricciardo. He was ahead of Danny Ricciardo. Now, Danny Ricciardo's strategy, I can't understand what Red Bull were doing there, and I'll get onto that in a moment. But Ricciardo really should have finished 3rd, right? Which means if Leclerc and Sauber had played the game right, they could have got a podium, and that would have been one hell of a way to end the season. Now, the reason I say that he could have got a podium and Danny Ricciardo should have done, right, is Ricciardo's strategy. As soon as he started going long on his first set of tyres, I'm thinking, okay, and I actually wrote a note down saying, okay, Danny Ricciardo, is he going to go even longer and then put the hypersofts on and be fast at the end? 2 laps later, Ted, the pit lane reporter, asks the same question.
Yeah.
So as the race is going on, I'm thinking he's going to go for the softest tyre. But then he pits and puts the super soft tyre on for like 15 laps. And I cannot grasp why someone would sit there on the pit wall and go, right, you're on the middle compound of tyre at the moment, so let's go really long, and then we're going to put you on the slower tyre for a shorter time, even though that slower tyre would be faster than the softer tyre that you're on at the moment, because Danny Ricciardo lost a ridiculous amount of time in probably the last 10 laps that he had on that first set of tyres.
I mean, logically, it would have made sense for him to split the race 50-50,
yeah,
and 50% of the race on each set of tyres. But it was nowhere near 50-50, but I do have an answer for it. And that is, they wanted Max Verstappen to be far enough up the road so that when Danny Ricciardo pitted,
he was behind him.
too far behind him to catch him back up.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised that happened. And I mean, people may deny the conspiracy theory that Red Bull have screwed over Danny Ricciardo, but if that had have been Raikkonen in the Ferrari and Vettel in the Ferrari, that situation happening, everyone would have gone, oh, that's Ferrari holding Kimi back, because we've said that in the past. And on this,
I mean, it wasn't even that Ricciardo had pressure from the leaders. Sorry, let's say the leaders from Hamilton or Vettel, and was holding them up to allow Max to catch up a bit more. He had about a 5 or 6 second gap, and they were lapping at a similar pace, because obviously Hamilton had to make his tyres last. But so it wasn't, Ricciardo's pace wasn't affecting Hamilton and Vettel.
Yeah.
So keeping him out at the front was just making the situation worse and worse for himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of, if they did try to go long to go on the softest tyre, unfortunately it didn't work and it backfired. But I don't think that's what happened, because, I mean, what was it? Hamilton pitted lap 7, was it? Yeah, lap 7. Hamilton pitted for the super soft tyre, and they knew straight away then they'll get to the end. So I can't understand why in the Red Bull with Danny Ricciardo they took him as long as they did. I mean, there was a period of time after Verstappen had pitted where if Ricciardo had pitted, he'd have come out ahead of Verstappen. And once that time had changed enough for Ricciardo to be behind Verstappen, I thought they'll bring him in now. But they didn't. They kept going. I think Verstappen ended up being like, he was 22 seconds behind Ricciardo at one point. By the time Ricciardo pitted, Verstappen was about 10 seconds behind him. You take those 10 seconds away, so to speak, then Danny Ricciardo would have been ahead of Verstappen and closer to Vettel. It's
the only other thing that they possibly would have been considering was the weather, because it did start to rain, and there was the doubt that it may rain enough for inters. Obviously, we never got anywhere near needing inters, but maybe they were just holding out for the fact that if everyone's got to pit, then they'll be in net first.
Yeah, possibly, but I mean, having said that, it was the first time it's ever rained in an Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And okay, I mean, I do know on the British commentary, and they said British comedy then, on the British commentary they did say that when it rains there, it tends to come fast and heavy. And to be fair, it didn't come fast and heavy. So I can understand them waiting to see if the inter tyre was going to be needed. That would have worked for them. But once it was clear that wasn't the case, they could have made the decision. But for me, that just emphasised that what you said, 5 months ago or whatever it was right. Red Bull will not allow Danny Ricciardo to finish a single race ahead of Max Verstappen since he announced.
Yeah, and it's quite surprising he's not even finished ahead of him because of Max having a problem.
Yeah,
Max has had issues and still finished ahead of him, or Daniel Ricciardo's not finished at all.
Well, you mentioned about Max there, so okay, Max Verstappen, what do you make of his race? Ignoring anything to do with his teammate, but how do you think Max got on in the race weekend?
Well, obviously he had a difficult start to the race, had a issue, not necessarily off the line, but in what they call the second phase. They just didn't get enough power and got swamped down to about 9th place or something. And from there, I suppose you could call it a recovery drive. And for him to get onto the podium from there, he's had a good race, really.
Well, you say that, but I think if James was there, he'd probably say, yeah, but all the cars he's had to overtake are nothing compared to his car.
Yeah, but he still had to get... This is what I can't understand with Ricciardo. I know you said, apart from his teammate, he dropped down to 9th and his teammate was ahead of him, yet he still manages to... Or the team managed to do something to get him ahead of his teammate.
Yeah.
After 10 laps, if your teammate's ahead of you before the first round of pit stops, you'd expect it to go that way to the end of the race, unless there's some sort of team intervention.
Yeah, you would expect that. Now, I mean, I'm not surprised that Verstappen had issues with his car. I mean, there was a lot of retirements in the race, and at the end of the day, it's the end of the season, so parts are getting old and tired and worn. The problem...
I want to mention something on that, though, just very quickly. this is one of the problems I've got with the current rules and regulations, because going into the last race, all the cars are going to be running engines that are on the last legs. And I'm not surprised that we had 4 or 5, I think it was 5 DNFs. Okay, Hulkenberg's had nothing to do with mechanical, but all the others were. For me, the first race to the last race and all the races in between should be equally interesting for the viewer. Yeah. Now, if you've got cars breaking down because they've got parts that are old, for God's sake, let them have a new engine, or let them have a newer part so that they're not running into... You can have this problem season after season, even if teams do get their heads around running 3 engines for a season. If you're running 21 races in a season, coming into the last race, you're going to have mechanical failures. And as a spectator, I don't want to see that. Yeah. I want to see racing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Mechanical failures can happen with new stuff as well, but they are more likely to happen with stuff that's worn. I mean, when you look at the likes of Honda, I'm not surprised that Toro Rosso and Honda have taken the approach they have this season, which is, we don't give a fuck, we'll just chuck new engines at it. They used 8 new engines on each car. Sorry, not 8 new engines. They're supposed to use 3 over the course of the season, and both cars used 8 in total. So they have kind of gone, nah, fuck it, we don't care, because for us, it's all about Red Bull next year. Now, to be honest, them taking that approach meant that Toro Rosso gave a few interesting races on occasion. Pierre Gasly fighting through from the back of the grid and Brendan Hartley doing it. But I mean, one of the things that got me, sort of touching on what you're saying there, is I couldn't believe it when I know David Croft said, or was it Brundle might have said, this is the first race this season where there is no grid penalties. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, it's the 21st and last race and it's the only one that's had no grid penalties? That's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there has been races in the past where there's been no grid penalties for mechanical reasons, as in people have had grid penalties for misdemeanors from previous races. But it's the first grid penalty free in total, which it does surprise me in a way, but I just think it's a load of
bullshit. Yeah, it is, and I know if James was here, he would agree with us. I know we've talked about it before, but I mean, as a spectator, I've mentioned it before because I want to know that when the cars are on the grid, not that they've all got a fair chance, but they've all got the best equipment that's available to them and their team. Not, oh, he seems really quick this week, oh, that's because he's got a brand new engine when everybody else is on old engines. That's not how the short sport should be for me. But as far as Verstappen goes, I mean, interesting that it looked at first like the problems that he had with the car off the grid were similar problems that Ricciardo had in Monaco, with the harvesting of the power. And I do know through the practice sessions a lot of people were complaining that they weren't able to harvest enough energy in a lap to be able to do, like, you know, sometimes they do an out lap and a flying lap, then a cool down lap and a flying lap. They weren't able to harvest enough energy in that cool down lap to go for another lap, so they'd have to do 2 cool down laps. So I mean, which is a little bit of a surprise, but then when you look at the Abu Dhabi circuit, there's 3 or 4 big braking zones, and the rest of it isn't really heavy braking. That final sector, you don't really use the brakes a lot. It's only sort of turn 1, the chicane before the hairpin,
5 and 6.
Yeah, and then the chicanes at the end of the long straights. The rest of it, you don't really brake that hard. So they were struggling to get power in. But what I couldn't believe, going from practice to the race, was the Red Bulls were so dominant in that final sector. And then come qualifying, the Mercedes and the Ferrari were faster. And I think that surprised a lot of people, including Ricciardo and Verstappen, because Verstappen went from driving amazingly in practice to driving a bit panicked in qualifying.
Well, it almost forced him to miss out in Q3.
Q2.
Get through to Q3.
Yeah.
Because he had to run again, and that's one of the reasons why he started the race on a different strategy. Again, looking at the strategies and all this to do with whatever tyre you set your qualifying lap on in Q2, I think that's a rule they need to ditch and just go, do you know what? The softest compound is a qualifying tyre. If you wish to use it in the race, so be it. You can start the race on whatever compound of tyre you want.
Well, I was wondering this, I know we've talked about it a bit before, that... Sorry, I think your PlayStation fan is quite loud. I can hear it.
I'll back off a bit. I'm a bit close to
it. Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this on Saturday and Sunday regarding the qualifying tyre, because I know we've mentioned it before, but I just don't like the idea that in a qualifying session people are driving slower than they probably can to look after a tyre. That's not what qualifying should be about. Qualifying should be about go out there and go as fast as you can for your starting position. And I wondered whether I would be open to a look, you can start the race on whatever tyres you want. They can be brand new, they can be old, it doesn't matter, you can start whatever you want. But in qualifying, we just want you to go as fast as you can.
Well, yeah, because I think it was Mexico, you had drivers, the Force Indias, not wanting to get into the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Run into a delta so that they would be 11th and 12th. They ended up 12th and 13th, I think, on the grid. But
11th
you shouldn't
and 14th.
You shouldn't have a situation like that where you've got drivers not wanting to qualify further up the grid.
Yeah.
They should be going out there to go as fast as they can to get as further up the grid as they can. For me, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, it got me thinking of, okay, well, how would you regulate it, right? If you were to say, right, you can use whatever tyres you want at the start of the race, and I actually thought, well, one of the reasons that they don't do it is so that the fastest car doesn't go and stick on the hardest tyres, stay out there dead long when no one can overtake them, and we end up with a boring race. Well, what you can do is you can say, right, before you even get to the location, the teams have to have submitted what tyre they're going to start the race on. So the first tyre is already pre-selected, and if that means that the fastest car has the hardest tyre, then so be it. But the teams would know it's not because we've got pole, we're going to stick the hardest tyre on. It's we're going to start on the hardest tyre, and if we happen to qualify 13th, then that's where we are and that's the tyre we're going to be on. But I like the qualifying format we have. I don't like this particular tyre rule. I wouldn't want them to change it to the tyre they use in Q3, although in a way I'd probably prefer that. But you'd then have cars not going as fast as they could. I mean, how many times this season have drivers not been able to improve their second flying lap in Q3? Quite a lot. And it's not because they're not good enough, it's because they're pushing as hard as they can, and perhaps over pushing on occasion and making a mistake. If they had to look after the tyre, they wouldn't push.
The reason why it's Q2 and not Q1 is because they don't want drivers going into where they can get onto pole position, not being on pole position because they want to use a harder tyre. Do you know what I mean? It's like the fastest car should be on pole position, so that's why they use the tyres from Q2. But in that case, then why not do it on Q1? Whatever tyres you use in Q1, you start the race on.
Yeah, I mean, if they did it that way, it'd be more open for some of the top teams to use the middle compounder tyre or even the harder compounder tyre, because they should still be faster than the slower cars. Because you mentioned about Verstappen. He very nearly went out of Q2 because he made a mistake on his lap. and had to run the softer compound tyre. And okay, it would have been exciting had he been knocked out, but it would have been knocked out because of sort of tyre choice rather than speed. And that's not why you should get knocked out of a qualifying session, really. About qualifying should not be about what tyres you're going to start the race on. It should be about who's got the fastest car and then following on from that. And if someone decides to qualify on a harder tyre, that's up to them. Their starting position is what it is. So I would say I do think it needs looking at. I mean, I know in our F1 league that we ran a while ago, there was a race where we found out there was problems with the tyres on the Codemasters game. We implemented a rule that said, right, every driver has to start the race on the softest compounder tyre, on the fastest tyre, to make it fair for everybody. Nobody gets any kind of advantage, and it worked. It meant that the cars at the back, they didn't just go and stick a harder compounder tyre on to go long. They had a faster tyre, which meant they were closer to the battle. And that then, it got me thinking, how many times this season have we seen a lot of cars down the grid using a harder compounder tyre and missing out on the fight in the hope of having a softer tyre and faster lap times later on, and still not getting in the fight? So, I mean, because it's like, I know in this race, who was it? I think it was Van Dorn at one point hadn't pitted. He went quite long, and was in, okay, he was in a bit of a battle, but he went so long that, I don't know, it kind of made it pointless for me.
Well, Van Dorn is pointless.
Well, yeah, he is. Okay, I suppose we should talk about the start of the race and Hulkenberg. One of the big talking points of the race weekend. So, I know that James has asked us to talk about this as well, but I am interested to know, Steve, what your thoughts were when you saw from when you saw his car rolling.
I just thought, we've actually got something interesting to watch. That was my first thought. My second thought was, I wonder who voted in our predictions for Hulkenberg to be the first one to crash out. Yeah. And then when he was upside down in the wall, I was thinking, he can't get out of that.
Yeah.
And then when you hear on the radio his panic about, is there any fire? That's when the danger.
He wasn't asking if there was fire. He was telling them there's fire.
Yeah, I mean, there was panic in his voice there, and that's when it kind of like all becomes real of how dangerous the sport can be. And even with Gasly, when he was asking if there was fire, because obviously he wants to stop near a fire marshal if there was fire coming out of the car. But for Hulkenberg, if he didn't have the halo on, would he have been able to get out? Possibly. But if he'd have been injured or knocked out, he wouldn't have been able to get out anyway.
Yeah, true. Well, to begin with, it was Hulkenberg's fault, the accident. And if you disagree with that, I could tell you why it was his fault. But it was Hulkenberg's fault, but that's irrelevant to the situation that his car ended up in. It's not very often that F1 cars do catch on fire nowadays, but when they do, it's not good. I mean, do you remember when there was a Renault that caught fire in a pit lane? I think it was last season or the season before.
It was a Williams.
No, there was a Renault as well, I think. Oh no, or was it a Williams? No, there was a Renault that caught fire in the pit lane, and
I know it was a Williams at Montreal.
No, it was. I'm pretty sure it was Kevin Magnussen.
Oh, I can't remember. I don't recall that particular one.
Yeah, there was a car on fire in the pit lane, and that was not a good situation. I mean, that was a bad fire. And I know that Renault in the past, when Palmer was driving for them, they had that car burst into flames 2 or 3 times over the course of a year. Even at a young driver test, it burst into flames. So fires are possible. Now, given the situation his car ended up in, and there being a fire. I mean, there was definite panic in his voice, but the thing is, people could quite easily say, and I'm pretty sure that I've heard that the FIA have said this, said that, well, the safety car was there straight away and the fire marshals were there straight away. And my response to that is, yeah, great, but if it happens on lap 2, the safety car's a minute and a half away.
Yeah.
And if it happens on a part of any track that is much further away from a marshal, that's another 20-30 seconds for a marshal to get there. I mean, you think, just off the top of my head, any particular corner, I'm trying to think of a few. Pouon, right? If you go off at Pouon and end up near the track still, the marshals are a good 100 metres away.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're right there. So if there is a fire and the marshals aren't right there and the safety car isn't right there, you've got a problem. Now, I do know that with the design of the Halo, they're designed in a way that when they turn on their roof, they actually tip over to one side so a driver can get out. Well, Hulkenberg was unfortunate that the car was resting on the tyre barrier, meaning the car couldn't tip over to one side and he was stuck. There was no way he could get out of the car. Even if he'd have undone his belts, he wouldn't have been going anywhere. So that for me is a concern. Now, if the Halo wasn't there, would he have been able to get out? Maybe. But with the Halo there, definitely not. The other thing that concerned me as well is, if that had been a much higher speed crash, let's say for example you've seen the accident that the young lady had in the Macau Grand Prix, right? That was a massive fucking crash. Now imagine that her car ended up upside down and it took 20 marshals to roll it over. She's got spinal damage, and that jolt of that car being dropped down, that's going to make it worse. So from a safety standpoint, having to manhandle a car back onto its wheels before you get the driver out is not a situation you should end up in. So it did make me think, it's like, well, okay, should they have a... I mean, I know we've talked before, and I mentioned about earlier in the season, talked about should the FIA be taking their own safety vehicles to each event. For example, a vehicle that could pull up alongside a car that is upside down, attached to certain points on the car, and safely right to the car. It doesn't take 20 marshals to stand on one side of it and then one marshal on the other side going, no, it's fine, just drop it on me. And having the right equipment to do it properly, because if that situation happens in a much higher speed crash, that's going to be a fucking problem for the driver.
I'm just trying to think though. I mean what alternative is there to the Halo? I mean, let's put it this way: if there'd been a windscreen, would he been able to get out?
Oh no, he wouldn't. I mean,
it's like it's one of those situations where, okay, a Halo might save a driver in so many potential accidents, but it maybe end up being more important the driver can get out of an accident if it's upside down.
The thing is though, I mean, the way I would look at it is, the Halo on occasion this season has shown to be effective. For me though, it still isn't right, because something can hit it and go down to the driver. We've all said that before. So for me, it should be the Halo with a screen. That's what I think should be on the car. If they're going to have a Halo, the Halo should have a screen. And okay, that wouldn't help Nico Hulkenberg in the situation that he was in, but that's where you have to go, or that's where the FIA should go, right, we need to up our game. Because the history of Formula 1 has shown that the FIA tend to react rather than preempt. I mean, you look at all of the safety devices, the Halo, it's a reaction. The hands device was a reaction. Helmets are a reaction. Wheel tethers were a reaction.
Same with seatbelts.
Seatbelts were a reaction. So it's all reaction rather than preemptive. I mean, I know we've said it before, but how many times at Suzuka had Martin Brundle said, "Oh, I don't like it when marshals are in the firing line, especially at that corner. I ran over a marshal there." I know he'd said it for about 10 years in a row. So when it happened with Bianchi, as saddening as that was, I was sat there thinking, he was telling them for 10 years. Has no one been listening to this? It's like, oh no, something's happened, right, let's react. And they didn't react with, well, really, we shouldn't perhaps have a massive JCB on the fucking edge of the track. What we'll do instead is we'll make the car a bit safer. So if it does hit the big fucking JCB, the driver might be alright. But personally, I can't imagine that a Halo would have saved Jules Bianchi.
Well, that's something that they've actually said, though, that would a Halo have saved Bianchi? Probably not. No. But in hindsight, from looking at that situation, it will save other lives going forward. Not necessarily would have saved Bianchi's.
Yeah. I mean, as sad as it is, I mean, when someone does die in a sport, steps should be taken to minimise that happening. I mean, I know you mentioned to me a while recently that you'd watched, was it you or was it James, about the Dale Earnhardt documentary?
Yeah, it was me.
It was you. That is a phenomenal documentary. For anyone that's listening that likes some sports documentaries, have a look at the Dale Earnhardt one. It is unbelievable. But he was a driver who was like, Hans device had just been brought in, and he was like, "Nah, you're alright. I don't want that. I don't need it."
Just for those that aren't aware of what a Hans device is, basically it's like it's like a horseshoe-shaped collar that goes around the shoulders and over the shoulders and clips onto the crash helmet, so that if they're in a crash, the head can't get thrown forward too far. It gets basically there's some resistance there, and it's supposed to reduce an overextension of the neck, so that your neck can't extend too far and you can't break your neck in a collision. And it doesn't just work in a head-on collision, it works also with a side impact. So Mika Hakkinen at Adelaide years ago, when he had his side-on impact, it would have helped in that as well, because obviously the tad that goes from the shoulder to just near where his ear is, and it would have prevented it from going too much left and right, and that would have prevented some of his injuries.
And if you've never seen the footage of Mika Hakkinen's crash, watch it, because you won't believe how much his head gets thrown about. But it's similar with like Roland Ratzenberger. It's very visible in that accident when his car is sort of coming to a stop, just how exposed their heads were. So when his head was sort of going to the left, there was nothing at all to stop it. It's basically hanging out the side of the car. Whereas with a Hans device, I'm not saying it would have saved his life, but with a Hans device, his head wouldn't have got thrown about anywhere near as much as it did. So I can understand that sometimes the FIA do have to react to stuff that happens, but there is stuff that they can preempt. So I just hope that with the Nico Hulkenberg accident, they're able to up their game in some form or another, because as I said, and this is something that I know James had wanted us to mention, I will actually read out what James sent us in a second, but if that car had not been right next to a fire marshal or marshals and had burst into flames, there would have been absolutely nothing Nico Hulkenberg could have done. And in these F1 cars, as I mentioned about the car that was on fire in the pit lane, when they get on fire, they get on fire badly, which means you ain't getting close to it. Now, I can't say I know exactly what a track marshal wears, but I don't think they'd be able to go up against a massive fire, given that they haven't got like oxygen masks and helmets, and I don't know if their overalls are fireproof or not. But even a driver's race suit, which is meant to be fireproof, isn't going to save them if the car's massively ablaze. So I don't think the marshals are equipped for it.
No, I mean, the problem with the drivers in a fire is it's not necessarily the the burns, it's the lack of oxygen that the fire, because the fire burns off the oxygen and the driver can't breathe then.
Yeah.
And that's the problem the driver will have.
Okay, so I'm going to read out what James sent us earlier. I could show you the dick pic he sent, but I won't. He didn't. He says, all I want you to discuss is the halo trapping Hulkenberg in the car upside down. Should this call for a redesign, as if he had injured his back or was in pain? How should they get him out, as they would not be allowed to roll the car over like they did? Plus, let's say he was upside down in the middle of the road and got hit by another car. Yes, the halo would protect him, but if a fuel leak occurred far enough away from a fire marshal, he would be trapped burning alive. Ask viewers for suggestions for halo redesign. I mean, we have kind of hinted on it now. I mean, I hadn't thought about the idea of a car being upside down in the middle of the road and getting hit by another car. I mean, that I think the halo would protect him in that situation. But I don't know. I mean, motorsport is dangerous. But should they redesign the halo?
I think they should always be constantly looking at ways to improve it, but I don't know enough about the design of the halo to know exactly what they need to do to change it to improve it.
Yeah, I think rather than redesigning the halo as such, I'm pretty sure that the halo is going to be slightly redesigned for next year, and it will evolve over the years. But I think, I mean, James mentioned in his message to us about like if he had been injured or hurt his back, them rolling the car over like they did, they wouldn't be able to do that. There's a reason, and for anyone that doesn't know, a driver can actually be extracted from the car, seat included, by a crane lift if required. So if they've got serious back injury or potential serious back injury, they can be fully extracted from the car. It's a little time consuming, but it's worth it. However, if you've got to fucking roll the car over and bump it over first, then you might as well just fucking pull them out by hand. But this is where I think, sort of my comment of, I think the FIA should go, right, okay, there's the halo, but we need the right equipment to deal with the situations. And I do think that the FIA should be taking to every single race their own equipment, and I mean recovery vehicles, emergency vehicles, crews, people that work as a team, that are work together, that grow with experience, that know what each other are doing, know how to handle every situation, have vehicles that can right a car. I mean, because this is the thing, if you were going to design a recovery vehicle that could do it all, that would be more productive. It'd be costly, but it'd be more productive than having like Joe Farmer in his JCB. So I think I'd say redesign the safety aspects of the sport. And for anyone that perhaps doesn't think that may be the issue, I mean, Steve, you told me about the documentary with the guy that used to be the safety car, the doctor. And that is mind-blowing when you watch that. If you haven't watched it, folks, find it, watch it. It's fucking amazing. But it gives you an insight into what the FIA used to be like, and to a degree are still like. In that, okay, they could spend a lot of money and have the world's best motorsport safety crew. But they won't do that because it's...
I mean, there's just to give a bit of a shout out, the guy that's done those interviews, or the YouTube channel it's on, is Mario Mirth. So that's Mario, Mario space Mirth, Muth. And yeah, there's some very interesting documentaries on there, or interviews, if you could say. But that safety car driver, doctor, his is, for me, was one of the most informative.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the guy's name now, and I'll have a quick look, see if I can find it, but I'm pretty sure it'll pop up here.
Yeah. Now, go on.
Is that his name? Maurice Hamilton.
Morris Hamilton?
Maurice Hamilton.
Wasn't he a team boss?
Oh no, sorry. Gary Hartstein was the doctor.
There you go.
Yeah, Gary Hartstein.
Yeah. Well, I've often wondered. I mean, I'm not entirely sure about how the IndyCar series do it, but whenever there's an accident in IndyCar, you will hear the commentators say something like, "Oh, and here's the Verizon safety crew." The safety crews have got their own sponsor. Now, if they've got their own sponsor, that's money that's coming in. Now, I don't know if it's the same crew that go from race to race or if it's a crew that works the track. But I think their crew, although I don't like the way they go about their business, I think their crews are actually set up more professional, with jet blowers on the back of their cars to blow fluids off the circuit or bits of carbon. They've got much more equipment than F1 guys have got. F1 guys, I mean, where is it? Is it China where they've got broomsticks?
It might have been China, but yeah, they've got like witches' brooms for brushing because they fill the between the curbs and the grass, they use sand rather than just refilling it with soil, because the soil gets washed away with the rain, whereas the sand just gets wet and stays there. So they use a lot of sand. So when cars have driven through it, they find that the brooms are the easiest thing to brush it back up with.
But yeah, so I in sort of response to James's comments, I think the FIA need to up their game, and I hope to God that there's somebody there talking sense to them, because you take the likes of, I mean, when you actually think about it, you've got driver stewards. How recent is that? 4 years? 5 years? Probably not even that.
Quite possibly, yeah.
And even that is still in its infancy as to how that's run. And I don't know. I think it needs a big game changer, and unfortunately, I think it's going to take a big incident for the sport to change. In that respect, something along the lines of a Jules Bianchi incident. But I mean, even with the Jules Bianchi incident, okay, with the halo, what has been the arguments for and against? It's been visual and cost, maybe. Now, looking at how difficult it's been for the FIA to get the halo through, I can imagine it would be almost impossible to get them to put their hands in their pockets to come up with the world's best safety crew. And the thing is, the stupid thing is, if they actually decided they were going to do it, they would have more than enough people wanting to be a part of that. You look at all the people that volunteer as marshals for free. If they had the opportunity to do it as a job, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd do it, because one of the reasons they volunteer to do it is because they don't get paid, so they can't afford to do it as a full-time job. They need to work and then spend their weekends at the racetrack because it's what they enjoy doing.
Yep, I agree 100%.
But anyway, slightly back towards the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix then, given that Hulkenberg was hanging like a cow, I did find his comment funny, but it did make me think, hang on a minute, what are you doing to your cows, Nico? Maybe he'd watched a Rocky film in the night or two before the race, got himself in the mood. But yeah, I did mention that it was Hulkenberg's fault. Now, I know when I spoke to you a couple of days ago, Steve, I did ask if you'd seen the interview after the race with Nico Hulkenberg, where he explained what happened.
I've not seen the interview with Hulkenberg. Right,
okay. Right, it was Hulkenberg's fault. He turned in on Grosjean. Now, during the race when he was interviewed, he said, you know, at first I'm not sure, I didn't know what had happened. I've seen it now and I can explain it. He says, both me and Roman braked late and went deep into the corner. I went deep and he went deep and he was on me outside. He He said, I thought he had then gone straight on. So he thought that Grosjean had basically straight line turn 10.
Which a lot of people probably would do in that situation.
Yeah. Which is why he went for the apex of turn 10, but Roman was there. So he didn't put any blame on Roman Grosjean. And this is one of the things I like about Nico Hülkenberg. He didn't put any blame on Roman Grosjean. He basically put his hand up and said, I didn't realise he was there, and I turned in and I shouldn't have. And it's like, nice one, well done. Rather than, oh well, he should have slowed down and got out me way, he shouldn't be there, fucking blah blah blah. Nah, you don't get that with Nico Hülkenberg.
No, but it just goes to show how unsighted the drivers are, even though they've got mirrors and everything else. Because of how enclosed these cockpits have become, not necessarily because of the halo, because it's to do with the side protection as well. They're so enclosed in the open cockpit in a Formula One now that they can't. They've got no peripheral vision.
Yeah.
And you just don't know that they're there.
And it's different. I mean, he did say that Grosjean was in his blind spot, but it is also different now that the cars don't make anywhere near as much noise. In the past, 10 years ago, you'd have heard that the car was next to you. Now, you're not going to hear it because the exhaust directs it away from you. But I'm trying to think if I made this up in a dream or not, but I'm pretty sure I heard you or James say something about they're thinking about putting rear view screens in the cars.
Yeah, it was me.
All right.
It was something that they'd considered. Well, basically, the display on the screen, the multifunction display that they've got, it is very easy for them to attach a rear-facing camera so that they can press a button like you do on a computer game, and it shows you on the screen what's behind you. They don't have to have it on all the time because they can scroll it on and off when they need it. So,
well, here's a thought. What about, rather than doing something, I mean, they could do that, but how about on the halo, you have those rear parking sensors that go beep, 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 beep. Right? So you have those kind of sensors on the back, and on the halo above you, it kind of flashes to the right if there's a car behind you, or to the side of you on the right and one on the left. So you'd be driving along and you know if that right side starts flashing, fuck, there's a car near me. You can look in your mirror. If you can't see it, then at least you know it's there. I mean, it may be a little bit futuristic, but that'd work. That'd be a good feature of the halo.
It would help Vettel when he's overtaking someone to know that it's gone final past them before he cuts back in again.
Exactly, definitely. I was just thinking, who else would it help? Magnussen, although it wouldn't help Magnussen because he wouldn't be able to go, oh, well, I don't see him, I didn't know it was there. There's a big fucking flashing light. Oh, I didn't see it. But anyway, okay, so I mean that's Hülkenberg talked about. You mentioned when we first got started this evening that it was a race that there wasn't a lot to fight for, and you're right, there wasn't. But I did find parts of it still very exciting. But I was going to ask you what your highlights might have been of the race.
It's an odd one because the highlights for me was the fact that Max got a shit start, so you know that it'd be interesting for him coming through. I was all pumped up for seeing Leclerc up into fourth place, but then I got let down when he pitted. And then as the race went on, I was like, okay, with these last 5 laps, the British commentators were saying that the guy that's leading is going slower than the guy behind him, but the guy behind him, which is, is going even quicker. And so it's like they were in reverse order of their lap times. So he was kind of expecting this like crescendo at the end of the race, but it just went stale.
Yeah.
So for me, the race wasn't actually that full of highlights, to be honest.
No, I mean,
apart from, I thought it was funny when Fernando Alonso was asked to push because he might still get a chance of a point, and his comment was, "I've got 1,800 points. I don't need them anymore."
Yeah.
And so, well, why not have 1,801? But It was interesting that Crofty knew exactly how many points he got, and he got 1,899. And if they got one more, it'd have been 1,900.
Yeah.
But do you know how many seconds worth of penalties he got?
15.
15, because he kept cutting the chicane without backing off.
I saw something. I think it was last night, or yesterday, and it was a post on Facebook, admittedly, so it probably isn't true. But it said FIA bemused as to why Fernando Alonso purposefully cut the chicane 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
So the FIA thought he was doing it on purpose, and to be fair, I could understand. I mean, don't get me wrong. In the racing league that we had, if somebody had been done that on their last race, we wouldn't have been happy about it. But just from a cheeky driver's point of view, I could understand Alonso going, "Well, what are you going to do? It's my last race.
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck? I'll go and take that 10th place and get everybody excited, and then you can penalise me afterwards." And to be fair, if he'd have done it, caught him, passed him, then got penalised after the race and lost the position, there probably would have been an uproar.
Possibly,
as stupid as it is. But it did make me laugh, though. I mean, again, obviously we were watching the British commentator. It did make me laugh when Crofty goes, "I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Fernando Alonso has got the fastest middle sector of the whole race in the bit with the 2 long straights." And then Brundle 2 minutes later goes, "Yeah, well, that's because he's just been given a penalty for cutting the corner." So yeah, that explains why he was a second faster than everybody else. I mean, okay, I'm going to get onto Alonso a little more in a moment. You've mentioned a couple of times about Max Verstappen, right? Max Verstappen chucking up the inside of Esteban Ocon. Was it revenge? Was it purposeful nudge out, like, get out my fucking way?
Oh, I think he was on full lock, and it was one of those where, for me, if Ocon hadn't have overtaken him, he would have had a penalty. Max Verstappen would have had a penalty. And for me, if I was Ocon, I would have just sat behind him and waited for him to get a penalty.
Yeah.
And just go, serves you fucking right.
Yeah, well, he probably would have done, but to be fair, I mean, Verstappen was so slow on the straight with his car, suffering, he just didn't have the power. I mean, even with a struggling car, he did manage to make a few nice overtakes. It was a nice battle with Ocon there, and I did find it quite amusing. I also found Christian Horner's post-race comment in the press conference quite amusing as well. Have you seen that where there's him and Toto Wolff?
I've seen it. The one from before the race, which was
it might have been before
where they have the
team principals
team principals interviews. Yeah, where basically it was said maybe you can teach him what the flags mean.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because they were on about Esteban Ocon saying, Esteban Ocon will be on the grid in 2020, and he'll be working with the team closely as a reserve driver. Christian Horner pipes up say, yeah, maybe you can teach him what the flags mean. It didn't go down well with Toto Wolff. He didn't even crack a smile.
Omar Otmar was there, whatever his name is.
Otmar
Zafner, that's it. And he didn't even batter an eyelid. He just didn't say anything.
That's because he's Force India, isn't he? What was I going to say? Okay, right, Fernando Alonso. It's only right that we talk about Fernando Alonso. Now, there's 2 things that I want to mention straight away. Number 1, my highlight of the whole race was the Champions Guard of Honour that Hamilton and Vettel gave Alonso. Now, in the last 2 seasons at Monza, we've seen Mercedes do a side-by-side formation lap on the way back to the pits. I don't know if this had been pre-arranged, but to have Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel going around the track doing donuts, to then be able to work it into going side-by-side with Fernando Alonso all the way back to the grid, I thought was really good. Now, I'm guessing it had been pre-planned for Alonso to join the top 3 on the start-finish line, do a few donuts. I had no problem with that whatsoever, but I did think it was a nice touch. And some people might say, well, like they didn't do that for Button, or they didn't do that for other people. Felipe Massa got a decent send off, but it wasn't quite the same as it. To be fair, it all depends on the person and what they've done and what they've achieved.
It also depends on whether they're in the car at the end of the race.
One of
the things that Alonso said on the grid to Martin Brundle was, "I want to get to the end of the race.
Yeah,
I want to enjoy the race. Want to get to the end of it." And I'm wondering whether he already knew that was going to be granted for him to do that, because I've listened to the F1 YouTube channel where they do their best radio bits.
Yeah,
and the message came across to Vettel and to Hamilton and to Alonso that they could all proceed to the start-finish line to do the. I don't know whether they each were told that who else would be there, but they were all told that they had permission to go to the start-finish line to do donuts.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but Grosjean on his in-lap said to his engineer, do I have permission to do a donut? This is like on his in-lap halfway round, and his engineer comes back. Pit wall said no. He said, "What? So I can't do any donuts?" And the engineer repeats, "No, sorry, the pit wall have said no." Straight away, donut.
And rightly so. Rightly so. Did you hear what Lewis Hamilton said to Verstappen in the cool-down room?
Which bit? Because I did hear it, but whether I remember it or not is another matter.
Well, you see, I couldn't remember on our last podcast if I had heard correctly or not when Verstappen, I thought he'd said, "Tell Hamilton my tyres are going off," or "my tyres are getting faster." Well, I'm pretty sure I heard Lewis Hamilton turn around to Verstappen and go, "Where were you for the donuts?" Like, where were you for the donuts? Because Verstappen came round much like when they were getting out of the cars, he appeared.
Yeah.
Now Verstappen did say, he says, "I couldn't see. It's had oil all over my visor. I couldn't see where I was going," because a couple of laps previously, obviously he'd been following Gasly when his engine blew up. Now, admittedly, when I saw the smoke coming out the back of the Toro Rosso, I did think to myself, okay, as the following driver, why are you sitting right behind him in all that fucking smoke and dirt and oil?
But not only that though, why was Gasly still on the racing line?
Yeah, because he knew that something was going wrong, because he'd already been on the fucking radio. Because obviously the radio messages are delayed, so we hear him on the radio saying there's something wrong with the engine, there's smoke coming out the back of the engine, check it, and he's on. And while that radio message is being portrayed, they're going round the hairpin onto the back straight, and I'm thinking, why are you sitting on the racing line? Because if there's smoke, there's a damn good chance that there's oil coming out of the car, or if not oil, hydraulic fluid. Neither of which are great on a slightly greasy track. But there we go.
Should we have a look at how we did with the predictions?
We could do that, yeah, I suppose. I'm just having a quick look to see if there was anything else that I wanted to mention about the race. I mean, of my notes, I mean, I do make extensive notes, and most of it is just in case I need to reference something. You know, recently I've been really good with my highlighters, and usually I've had to use 3 or 4, like one for each driver that's done something interesting. This time I've used 2. One is orange, which was for for Max Verstappen. But we've talked about everything that happened with him. And the other was blue for Leclerc, but there's only like 2 or 3 things to mention about him. The only other things I would say is, on the last podcast we talked a little bit about Valtteri Bottas, and I think you said that, and I know James had said, that if Bottas doesn't start firing on all cylinders next season, he's going to lose his seat. Well,
I can see that happening.
Well, I don't know if Mercedes will remove him before the end of next season. If he's doing shockingly bad, they might, but I can't see them doing it, because it's pretty much a career ender doing that, and I don't think Bottas deserves that situation. but I could see them putting Ocon in the car a year later. But Bottas had an odd race this weekend.
He had a shocker.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand when your tyres are going a bit or your brakes are overheating, making a couple of mistakes, but something either was just not right with that car or not right with him. And after the race, you know, they pitted him late on, which I'm not surprised they did, because he'd already been overtaken by Verstappen and Ricciardo. So he wasn't going to lose anything else by pitting. But after he'd pitted, the engineer comes on the radio and says, yeah, we saw something wrong with the right rear tyre, so we just wanted to be safe. And after the race, Bottas was like, I don't know what they were talking about. So I didn't see anything wrong with the tyre. So I think they were trying to cover him and say, oh, well, you're struggling because you got a problem with your tyre. But I'm not sure that that's the case. I think his head had just dropped massively in that one.
Yeah, I mean, he pitted a lot later than Hamilton, and he was way off Hamilton's pace.
Yeah, it was. It was massively off Hamilton's pace. I mean, it was a shame for me as well that Raikkonen had his engine problems or electronic problems. I would have loved to have seen how he got on. Also, he royally fucked me in our predictions, which we will have a look at now. Okay, so do you remember, Steve, anything that you predicted other than Hamilton for the pole and the win?
No, nothing.
All right, okay. In that case, I suppose I should send it to you, shouldn't I? It might be a good idea. Right. Let's see, it'll just take me a moment to send it. Okay, so looking at the predictions then, Steve went for Hamilton on pole, which was correct. James went for Max Verstappen, and I went for Kimi Raikkonen in hope more than sensibility. In all honesty, on Friday night, I was thinking Max Verstappen could get pole position here with how fast that Red Bull was in the final sector, but just wasn't to be. For race winner, Steve went for Hamilton, James went for Ricciardo, and I went for Kimi Raikkonen. Now again, Steve was correct, but I do think that had Red Bull not fucked about, Ricciardo would have had a chance of winning that race.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you.
Now, for anyone that's wondering why Ricciardo's going to Renault next year, that might be why. Okay, for the podium 3, you, Steve, went for Hamilton, Verstappen and Vettel. So you do get 3 points, very nearly got a full 5 bonus points. If you'd have got Verstappen and Vettel in the other way round, but not to be, but still a good points haul. James went for Ricciardo, Hamilton and Vettel, so he gets 2 points for Hamilton and Vettel. And I went for Kimi, Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, so I get 1 point. First to crash out. Interestingly, Steve, you said Marcus Ericsson, and you know what? He was the first person to crash in the whole weekend.
Was he?
Yeah. He crashed on the exit of turn 1. He didn't crash out, but he did crash, and it wasn't in the race, so it wouldn't have counted anyway. James went for Max Verstappen, and I went for Lewis Hamilton. How fucking wrong could I have been? And it was, of course, Nico Hülkenberg. So, yeah, none of us got the points on that one. And interestingly, I think I had actually picked Hülkenberg for the last race to be the first to crash out.
I think you did.
Yeah. If I'd have used my last race predictions for this one, I'd have got a good points haul. Okay, Martin Brundle. How many times would he say, I tell you what, during the race? Well, I'll be honest with you. Because of Nico Hülkenberg's crash, I completely forgot to count in the first 3 laps. But I know that after the first 3 laps, he never said it once.
So I was closest with 3 then.
Yeah, you were. Which made me think maybe he does listen to our podcast and he's a fan of you, Steve, because I'm pretty fucking certain that in the previous race he said it loads, because I kept chuckling to myself every time he fucking said it, but this time, no, nothing, not once. So yeah, point for Steve, nothing for me and James.
I wonder if he said it 3 times in the first few laps.
He might have done. You'll have to go and look at the first 3 laps. James wasn't far away though on 17. Okay, and the last prediction was what lap would a virtual safety car or safety car come out? And you said lap 1, which was correct. James said lap 2, and I said none. So I was wrong with that as well. I very nearly give James the point for saying 2, because I couldn't remember if the VSC came out first and then it was safety car a lap later, but either way the safety car was out on lap 2 as well.
It was instant safety car. It went straight up to safety car before the leaders were at the next chicane.
I thought that may have been the case, but anyway, what that means for the points this week is that Steve gets a massive 7 points, putting you on 50 for the season. James, that's not bad at all. James got 2 points. He has outscored me, and that puts him on to 31 points. I say he's outscored me. He's outscored me for this round. And I got 1 point, which puts me on 37, meaning that you, Steve, are the predictions winner for the 2018 season by a whopping 13 points.
Well, at this point, I just want to thank my sponsors. Thank you, Hamilton. But yeah, I mean, personally, I've voted for Hamilton to win and get pole, and he's done that often enough from just those points alone. Have been enough.
Yeah, that they have. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk recently about. I know we've talked about it in the past, is Hamilton, should he be considered as one of the best? And I would say he's definitely in the top 2. What number 1 being Michael Schumacher, just going on records alone, amount of championships. And now I know that Nico Rosberg was asked over the weekend if he believes that Lewis Hamilton wants to beat Schumacher's records, and Rosberg did say yes, he does want to beat them. He could beat the amount of wins that Schumacher has got within the next 2 years if the Mercedes is as good as it has been, and he could also match him for championships if the Mercedes is as good as it has been for the last 2 years. So it is possible that within 2 years Hamilton could be matching Schumacher on the championship and race win records, which if he did that would be one hell of an achievement. Unfortunately, I can't see Ferrari winning it with Vettel in the car unless the car is massively dominant.
I can't see Max Verstappen winning it because he makes too many mistakes.
Well,
he gives away too many points.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we slated Verstappen in the first half of the season, and I would say rightly so. The second half of the season, he has been one of the highest point scorers, if not I think before Abu Dhabi he was the highest point scorer. So he has shown maturity, I can't speak, throughout the season, and hopefully that will improve. And I thought it was very interesting because he was asked about has he done anything different, and he said well, my dad always used to tell me go slower to go faster, but I never used to believe him, but I realise now what he's on about, because I've done that. I've gone slower and I've slowed down a bit and I've gone faster because of it. And I thought, yeah, that's what I tell people to do. And it's right, it works. If you try pushing too hard, mistakes can happen, and that's where Hamilton's experience, or Alonso's experience, puts them up in that greatness category. Whereas Vettel this season has shown, you know what Vettel this season reminded me of? Rosberg in the season where he crumbled against Hamilton.
Yeah.
But the season after, he coped with it, won the title. But it does remind me of that season where Rosberg couldn't cope, made mistakes, and but he went away and realised, I need to do more, and did more. Can Vettel do that? I don't know, because when you look at his career, from just before him winning his first championship, when has he really been tested? Not since, well, not until Danny Ricciardo came along.
Yeah, and pretty much Danny Ricciardo wiped the floor with him.
Exactly. And what does Vettel do? Jump ship. Now, don't get me wrong, Vettel made the right move going from Red Bull to Ferrari when he did, given the troubles that Red Bull have had. But I could kind of see Leclerc jumping in that Ferrari next season and giving Vettel a run for his money, embarrassing him potentially.
Yeah, but not only will he embarrass Vettel, but I think he will become more of a title contender than what Max Verstappen currently is.
It could be.
Because everyone sees Max Verstappen as this future title contender. You know, he's going to be there. He's going to win a title at some point. It might not do.
Yeah.
And I think that people, after probably halfway through the season, after you've seen Leclerc race enough in the Ferrari, people go, he's got more of a chance than what Verstappen has.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's happened so many times over the years that a driver comes along and people go, oh, he's a future champion. Well, he's got the ability to be a champion, but will it happen? You don't know. I mean, you look at Webber. Did Webber have the ability to be a champion? Yeah. But with the other factors, yeah.
He had it in the bag until the last race of the season when Vettel pipped him by 1 point.
Yeah. I mean, Button, some would say perhaps he wasn't good enough in his earlier years to be a champion, but I mean, there's many drivers. I mean, you look at just the Sky crew, and you listen to how much they rave about how good Johnny Herbert was when he was first looking at getting into Formula 1, and that he would have basically been as good as, if not better than, Schumacher. That's how highly rated Herbert was as a young driver.
Well, what about Robert Kubica?
Yeah.
Okay, he's getting back into Formula 1 now, but I can't see him having a top drive to put him in a position to win a title now. But some of the top drivers, including Hamilton, rate Kubica up there with Alonso and say that, you know, he was someone that when they were racing go-karts and lower formulas, won everything.
Yeah.
Was better than everyone else around them at the time.
Yeah. Including
themselves. And he's not got a title. Okay, his career was cut short and is coming back now, but I mean, you know, just because you're good doesn't mean you're entitled to be a world champion.
No, I mean, to be fair, even if he hadn't have had his crash and his injury and he had joined Ferrari, he still wouldn't have had a title given the cars that they've had since then. What was it, 2011 he had his crash? And what year was it that Kimi won the championship in the Ferrari? 2009?
No, it was the year before. It was 2008.
Yeah, when Hamilton binned it at China.
Hang on, 2007. So it was the year Anna was born.
Alright. Yeah, 2008 was Hamilton and Massa at Brazil. 2009 was... No, 2011 was Button. I was going to say 2009 was Button. But anyway, it would have... Ferrari's last championship would have preceded Kubica joining. And you could say, well, with Kubica in the car, maybe things may have gone a different direction. Okay, yeah, maybe they would have done, but they had Alonso and it didn't. So, yeah, I think Vettel's got a lot to do next season, because if Leclerc shows anywhere near the talent he's shown this season, Vettel could be in trouble. And I just hope, I do hope that Ferrari don't basically go, Vettel's our number one driver from day one, but we're not going to say it, because I don't think they should. If they do that, they might as well just get someone shit rather than some young bloke. If you're going to get a young bloke in, give them the opportunity to show what they've really got. Yeah,
I mean, just imagine though, if partway through the season you've got Charles Leclerc on more points than Vettel, and Vettel's being told, sorry, you have to play second fiddle.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll end up saying, no, it's not in my contract?
You know what, I wouldn't be surprised. But having said that, I mean, he has moved out of the way for Raikkonen this season when he's been asked to. It's just that Raikkonen's been asked to more often than Sebastian has, because of situations that Ferrari have created. I mean, looking on to... I mean, I know that there's been the tyre test that started today in Abu Dhabi. Now, I can't say I've had a look at whether any of that has been televised at all, but I do wish it was, because I would have loved to sit there and see how Kimi Raikkonen got on in the Sauber, see if he was...
I saw a YouTube video of him in the garage climbing into the Sauber, and he was wearing completely plain white overalls. That all it had on it was his name tag. On his belt, and that was it. No sponsor, nothing. Just his name.
Yeah.
I'm thinking he looks like a painter and decorator. But yeah, it did look rather bizarre.
Yeah. But I've no idea how. I mean, okay, you could have a look at timing screens and stuff like that, but they don't really show you what's going on. But I would have enjoyed to watch it. Obviously, there is news about the lineup for next year, and I do find some of it quite interesting. We've already mentioned about Vettel and Leclerc. I hope that Ferrari turn up with a decent car, and I'm going to mention something in a minute about the points, but I just want to sort of go through the drivers a bit first. Obviously, Hamilton and Bottas are going to be teammates again. If Bottas doesn't raise his game, we'll be seeing Ocon take that seat. Or will we? Just hold on to that for a moment. Red Bull. Honda Red Bull, or Red Bull Honda. I don't know. They're either going to be amazing or it's just going to be an absolute fucking disaster. We're going to find out if Daniel Ricciardo has made the right decision or not. Now, Gasly in the Red Bull, I think, is a good move, but I think he needs to realise that he's not going to get favoured in that team at all. Because regardless of what Red Bull say, from the days of Vettel's first championship, they've always had basically a number one and a number two driver.
Yep. And all that keeps coming back to me is multi-21, Seb. Multi-21.
Exactly. There's a lot of change round at Williams, obviously, with Robert Kubica. I know all weekend it's been sort of touted as a fairy tale story, and it is. I just hope it's not a fairy tale story with a shit ending, because not all fairy tales are happy and lovely and amazing. It could, I don't know, I wouldn't want it to be a failure for him, but it could go that way.
Though, what's going to be a success for him? Because let's face it, that car could be in exactly the same dire straits as it is now, but fingers crossed there's enough aero change that it kind of resets the cars back to like square one in a way, and you're not going to know what the cars are going to drive like, and this might be what Williams have needed to be able to lift them from where they are, because they've got undoubtedly the strongest engine in the that's available, with it being the Mercedes engine.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden they've got to go back to square one with the aeros, and so has everybody else. If they get it right, they could jump from where they are now to be on the same lap times as the Mercedes.
Yeah.
You know, that's how much of a reset these aero. I mean, a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's just the front wings that are getting a bit smaller," and but it's not just the front wings that are getting a bit smaller, because the barge boards are reduced in height by half
and moved forward.
Yeah. But not only that, the way the air comes off that front wing is going to change the way the whole of the car handles, because of the way the air is going to flow over the rest of the car. So it's going to change more than just the fact that it's a front wing. So for saying that Williams have always been known for having a slippery car in a straight line, this kind of regulation change might actually suit them.
Quite possibly. I mean, I'm looking forward to see what he can do. I think it's great that he's back in a car in Formula 1, to be honest. I hope Williams can give him a car that he can at least be in a race, because I would like to see him in a much better car, with an opportunity of showing what he used to have. I mean, the difficult thing with Kubica though is, I remember what he used to be like as a driver, and it was fucking amazing.
Yeah, I mean, at the point when he had his accident, this is something, I don't know whether this is true or not. This is what I heard from one of the interviews this week. The point in time when he had his accident, he was leading the championship. I previously thought that the accident was between seasons, but apparently it wasn't. Well, apparently not. The quote I heard was that he was leading the championship at the point in time when he had his accident. Unless that was the accident he had at Montreal.
Well, that one might have been different. Let's see.
Well, you talk, I'll Google it.
I was going to Google it. I'd Googled it, but okay, you can look it up. Okay, moving on to next team, Renault. Right, okay, Renault. Daniel Ricciardo, Nico Hülkenberg. I think that's a brilliant driver lineup, but I don't know if the Renault's going to be good enough. To be fair, though, I mean, Carlos Sainz had a brilliant race this weekend. Made plenty of positions, made a fight of it. That car has got better, I think, over the course of the season. There's been races this season where the Renault has been shown to be very good, and then broken down. So I'm hoping that Danny Ricciardo isn't going to end up regretting the move that he has made. I think it's good for him as a driver to get a bit more freedom in a new team, but Renault need to up their game massively, but they are still rebuilding. I think I heard that Mercedes staff is about 1,700 or 1,900, and Renault's is about 600 at the moment, because they're still trying to rebuild. So a lot of work to be done there. Haas, go on.
Hang on. Kubica, it was in February 2011, so it would have been between the season. So it must have been he was leading the championship when he had his Montreal crash.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure as well in that season, or was it the season before, when BMW was there, they had a real good chance of fighting for the title, but BMW said, no, we're going to concentrate on next year's car, so this one's not going to be upgraded at all for the rest of the season. And it was like, why? We've got a chance of winning the championship. Yeah, well, we think we've got a better chance next year. They didn't. They pulled out.
So it was BMW Sauber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Haas, Romain Grosjean, Kevin Magnussen, sticking with the same drivers. As much as I don't rate Magnussen or Grosjean that much, I think it's a wise move for them to stay with the same drivers. And the reason being, it's direct comparison from how their car will have handled last season, and rate of progression with the car setup. I wouldn't be surprised though, end of next season you'll see changes at Haas regarding their driver lineup, because Haas this season have had opportunities for okay results, but the drivers haven't been able to come up with the goods. Okay, McLaren, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. I'll be honest, you know, that driver lineup concerns me. Not necessarily Carlos Sainz, and not necessarily Lando Norris, but them both together concerns me. There's not enough experience in that team, in those cars for a team like McLaren.
I've said it before with Williams, how they always normally run with, or in their successful years, they've always had a ex-world champion, and they've not done that for a long time. That's one of the reasons why they might be struggling. Same with McLaren. Normally they would have a world champion in their car.
Yeah.
And they've had Alonso, they've had Button, they've had Hamilton, they've had Kimi Räikkönen, well, he came and went beforehand, but you know what I mean? They've had world champions in their car.
Yeah.
No, they haven't.
Yeah.
And for me, they're going to have a step backwards next season, even though they were at the back anyway. I've got a funny feeling they're going to be the worst car on the grid next year.
I think it's either going to be them or Williams. But I mean, I rate Carlos Sainz. I think he's a brilliant driver, and from what I've been seeing about Lando Norris, he's also very, very good. But it's that experience of when things aren't going right, and that experience to be able to turn around to your engineers and say, look, don't panic, don't stress, let's work through it. Or that experience of being able to give better feedback. Now, I've no idea what either of those two are like at giving feedback, but is it going to be the same as, I mean, you listen back to Jenson Button, for example, on his team radios in practice sessions. Quite often you'd hear Jenson Button on the radio say straight away, saying to his engineer, right, the change we made's not quite worked, I think we need to dial a little more understeer into the car. So it's direct.
Yeah, when you listen to someone like Stroll, it's, oh, the car's all over the bloody place.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, well, is it tyres? Is it suspension? Is it aeros? What is it? Well, it's the driver. But no, that's the point exactly. So it'll be interesting to see how those two get on. But to be fair, McLaren's bigger problem is within their car design, because they've had a better engine this year and they've had a shocking season. A really shocking season. Okay, Force India, sticking with Sergio Perez, and I believe it was confirmed yesterday that Lance Stroll will be in the car, because I think he was in the car for...
Did the test.
Yeah, did the test. So it will be Lance Stroll in that car. I look at that team and I honestly just think, okay, Perez ended up with more points than Ocon. Stroll didn't. How is Ocon not in one of those cars?
Politics.
I mean,
because his daddy didn't buy the race team.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, I think he's been adopted now by Toto Wolff. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that their driver lineup concerns me. Perez he'll do a job for him. He always has. But, well, you look at how many times Perez and Ocon bumped wheels over the last 2 seasons. It was way too many times. The only advantage for Force India is that Lance Stroll is not at Sergio Perez's level, so he ain't going to be near him.
Yeah.
But if he is near him, it's going to be even fucking worse, because Lance Stroll, I didn't see him, my eyebrows were in my eyes. So, yeah.
Do you know what I'd say with Lance Stroll? It's just going to end up having more accidents at a higher speed.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. I didn't know there was a 7th gear and an 8th gear. Okay, Toro Rosso. This one, boggles the mind. Danny Kvyat, and announced today Alexander Albon, who I've heard the name, but I can't say I know anything about him. Young driver, I think, from Formula 2 or Formula 3, one of them. I could check. F2. So yeah, I don't know, and I'm going to make a point in a moment about not necessarily about him, but about Formula One regarding the young drivers. Danny Kvyat, I don't know, it begs the... Well, it just smells of desperation to me. To be going back to Danny Kvyat, I don't know, begs the question, are they that desperate, or has he just got that much respect within if it's respect within the team and they know that he's better than he's ever shown, then okay, give him a shot. I don't have a problem with it. But given everything we've seen from him before and going on that, I can't understand how he's in a car and Ocon isn't. It boggles the mind, it really does. But I'd love for him to prove me wrong. Sauber.
Do you think he'll last the whole season, though?
I don't know. Well, let's see. I mean, if the Toro Rosso's got a Honda engine in it next year, he might. If it's got a Ferrari engine in it, then he might get closer to Vettel, and then he won't be in the car for the rest of the season. I don't know. In a way, I think it's a shame that Brendan Hartley has basically been a guinea pig this season for Honda, and I think he deserves a better opportunity than what he's had. That's just the way I see it. Okay, Sauber, Kimi Raikkonen and Antonio Giovinazzi. I'm excited. Go on.
I'm excited for seeing Kimi Raikkonen in a slower car, because he did great when he was at Lotus.
Mm-hmm.
But Giovinazzi, it's just another one of them. He's had his chance, not necessarily a full chance before, but when we saw him in Formula One before, he made stupid mistakes. I think it was Malaysia, spinning coming out of turn, the last corner, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Just I don't know. He doesn't excite me as a driver.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that's another car where you'd say, surely Ocon would have been the better choice.
Yeah. Or even, Sauber could have tried approaching Alonso. Maybe they did try. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. In the Williams, obviously we've got Robert Kubica and George Russell, F2 winner, I believe. And to be honest, the only of the young drivers that I think is fully deserving of his place at the moment. Now, that may seem a little bit harsh. I've no idea how he'll get on in Formula One, but I do know, I've seen a few interviews and a bit of history about him. He has been very, very good in every category he has entered. And I have seen a few races where he has been absolutely phenomenal. So it will be interesting to see how he gets on. And to be fair, with Robert Kubica in the other car, he's probably got a better chance than Lance Stroll and Sorokin ever had, to be honest. But if you remember, Steve, earlier this season, you and James talked about the state of Formula 2, or GP2 as it used to be known, and Formula 3. I was looking at the list of previous winners recently. I'm actually going to see if I can get the list up again now. Bear with me a second.
Talking amongst yourselves, James and Steve? Oh, no, it's just me, innit?
Yeah. Okay, list of GP2 winners. Hang on, I've just seen an advert on Wikipedia. If everyone reading this gave £2, we could keep Wikipedia thriving for years to come. No. Fuck off. Right, okay, that's not quite the list that I was looking at. Wikipedia being useless for me today. Right, anyway, I can't find the list that I was looking at the other day. Basically, when I was looking at the list of previous winners, right, in recent times there was Leclerc, Van Dorn, Palmer, and a few of the young drivers that have broke through into Formula One. But obviously, there's a few young drivers that haven't won.
I've got a list.
Right, okay, go on. So, going from most recent backwards, a few.
Okay, so you want me to go backwards?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, because the people on this list are quite interesting, and to be fair, this list only starts at 2016, to be fair. So, before that, I'm trying to remember who the 2017 winner was.
Do you mean 2015?
No. It starts at 2016 and goes backwards.
Right, okay.
So 2017, you'll have to Google that.
Well,
see
2016 isn't Leclerc. It was
no, it's
Leclerc.
Gasly.
Right, okay. 2017 was Leclerc.
Okay, so we've got Pierre Gasly in 16, Stoffel Van Dorn in 2015, 2014 Jolyon Palmer, 2013 a name I've never heard of, Fabio Limer. Bloody hell. 2012, Davide Valsecchi.
Yep. Oh, no.
Oh, no. 2011, Romain Grosjean. 2010, Pastor Maldonado. How the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
2009, Nico Hulkenberg.
Okay, right. Stop there. Okay, so you've got from Nico Hulkenberg through a few different drivers, all bar two ended up in Formula One, right? And these are the championship winners. And out of all of those, Stoffel Van Dorn won more races in his season than all of the others ever did in their season, right? He was lauded as the best F2 has seen, including the likes of Lewis Hamilton. But you see him in F1, and he's not produced. Okay, he's not had a car to be able to produce magic, but he's had a car that he should have been able to produce something better than he has. Now, if Formula 2 didn't have this bullshit rule of, oh, well, when you win, you got to fuck off, you could have had the likes of Nico Hulkenberg continuously racing against Pastor Maldonado, who's continually racing against the next
Romain
Grosjean, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then people are going to be able to see over the course of a number of years the people that have won the championship. I mean, for example, would Pastor Maldonado have won the championship had Nico Hulkenberg still been in it?
I doubt it.
Exactly.
But, I doubt it very much. And just going back a bit more, I mean, you've got Thibaut Glock on the list, Lewis Hamilton, Rosberg. Yeah, so if you've kept some of those drivers in GP2 or F2 as it is now for a few more seasons, maybe they should change it to where if you win it twice, you're not allowed to race in it anymore.
Yeah.
But it does seem where once you've raced in there, you kind of screwed really what to do next if you can't get into F1.
Yeah. And
even if you do get into F1, you're going to be out again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the thing. If I was a team owner, when you're looking at how good these youngsters are, what have you got to compare them to? Okay, you got George Russell. He had been in like F2 or GP2, whatever you want to call it, for a few years, and so you do get to see a bit of them then. But I don't think that. I mean, someone could come into Formula 2 and win it in the first season and they're out, and someone else could be in Formula 2 for 10 years and then win it and they're out. Well, how do you get a comparison of which is the better driver? It could just be that the person who won it in their first year, their competition was shit.
Romain Grosjean got into Formula 1 without winning GP2. Alright, he was then out of Formula 1, went into GP2,
and won it.
Won GP2 and was without a drive for a year before he got back into Formula 1.
Yeah. And you see, I don't have a problem with him doing that because that was the right thing for him to do at that time. And you look at it now and it's like, okay, Lando Norris, I know there's been a lot of hype about him. He looks about 12 years old, but the kid can drive. And McLaren believe in him enough to put him in the car. But I don't know, I just don't.
I see a problem coming for next season for GP for F2.
Yeah.
All right, because Alex Albon was in GP2 or F2.
Mm-hmm.
So was Lando Norris. So was George Russell.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 drivers that have come from F2 for this season.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just trying to make sure there's no one else coming through that I've not mentioned. But if you've taken the top 3 drivers out of F2 in one go,
mm-hmm.
whoever wins it next time might be shit.
Yeah.
But they've still won it.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, you mentioned that because have you seen who has been announced as joining F2 for next season?
No, I was just about to have a look at the driver lineup.
Mick Schumacher confirmed
yes.
today, emulating his dad and his uncle, joining the Prima Racing team. So he is, you could effectively say, he is potentially 1 year away from Formula One.
Yeah, because I mean, the competition in F2 next season is not going to be great, is it?
Potentially, no. Because, I mean, George Russell, Lando Norris were, I mean, they were the 2 sort of top drivers in that category. But this is the thing as well. I mean, George Russell, I know, has been in GP2 for a few years, and he's been close, but didn't quite make it. Now, is that just because the people that won it were slightly better than him on those years? Maybe. Or did he only win it because in this year, he hasn't had the likes of a Stoffel Van Dorn or a Pierre Gasly beating him. Lando Norris was close but not good enough. And if you're at McLaren, are you worried that Williams have potentially got the better driver?
I mean, just having a look at the final standings for the F2 Championship this season, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got George Russell, Lando Norris and Albon, top 3.
Yeah.
All right. And to put this into perspective, they've got George Russell on 287 points, then it's 219, 212, then there's only one other that's got over 200 points, and everyone else is pretty poor after that. The only one, I'd probably say there's probably 2 drivers on this list that you might recognise the name of. In 4th place, Nick de Vries.
Yeah.
Because he's had an F1 test drive at some point, I'm pretty sure. Markelov, that's a name I've heard of before.
Yeah, he's if you think Danny Kvyat was a torpedo, Markelov. I mean, don't get me wrong, Markelov, I've seen him do some amazing races. Like, his recovery drives on occasion have been phenomenal, but I've also seen him do some stupid shit.
Yeah, and looking through the list, there's only one other name on here that rings a bell, and it's Latifi.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, actually, Aitken. Is it Jordan Aitken? That name. Yeah. That name rings a bell, but yeah, there's so many other names on here. I've not. Oh no, Dan Ticktum. His name's on the list.
Well, he's new. He's new.
He's only done 2 races.
Yes. And interestingly, I think it was Ted Kravitz was talking about Dan Ticktum. He was talking about him as if he was an old bloke, but he's a young kid basically. And he was on about how Dan Ticktum basically took his road car to a racetrack for a drive round, and next to, like, Ted's at the pit lane near the last corner, and all of a sudden he hears like a horn being beeped and turns around. There's Dan Ticktum coming sideways round the corner, waving his hands out the window. But apparently, I mean, Ted was saying that he is a young kid with a personality. Now, James would like that because James has gone on about like the amount of F1 drivers that have no personality, but Ted was saying that, I mean, people like Verstappen because he is a little bit fiery and he has got a personality. Well, Dan Ticktum is like another level of personality. Yeah. So Ted did say that he would love to see him in Formula One because Formula One needs someone like that in the paddock. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. With Mick Schumacher, though, him being in F2, if he's successful in if he wins in Formula 2, he will be in an F1 seat in 2020.
Yeah.
Which, if you remember, I mentioned, I says, if Bottas doesn't perform, then Ocon will be in the seat in 2020. or will he?
Or will he?
Because if Mick Schumacher wins the F2 championship, you can pretty much put money on it, he'll be in an F1 seat. And when you look at what seats may be possibly available, you would have to say potentially Valtteri Bottas, potentially Sebastian Vettel or Charles Leclerc, potentially Pierre Gasly, potentially Nico Hulkenberg, Haas as a possibility. McLaren could be a possibility. Williams could be a possibility. Sauber could be. He could pretty much jump into any car. But what I found interesting here was that we've said before that Mick Schumacher's wanted to pave his own path, right? He's wanted to do it on his own merits and not just jump up because of his name. But he has gone to the team that his dad and his uncle drove for in F2. So if that's anything to go by regarding Formula 1, that means you could be looking at Mercedes, Ferrari and Renault. Because Renault was effectively Benetton that Schumacher drove for.
Yeah, but before that he drove for Jordan.
Yes, and who did Jordan turn into?
Force India.
Red Bull.
Red Bull. Did it?
I think.
Red Bull took over Jaguar.
Who took over Jordan? No, they took over Stewart.
Yeah.
Well, did Stewart take over Jordan? I can't.
Because Jordan was based at Silverstone, and Red Bull are based in Milton Keynes.
Which is close to Silverstone.
I'm sure it's Force India.
Right, time for Google. So let's see.
Tap.
Let's see. Okay, Jordan did become Force India. Well, Jordan became... The team was sold in 2005 to Midland Group, who competed for one season as Jordan before renaming the team as MF1 Racing for 2006, before being sold later in 2006 to Dutch car manufacturer Spyker, and they were then sold to become Force India. So Jordan is Force India.
Kind of.
Kind of, yeah. I don't think he'd... Well, I don't know. You know what? Last season I would have said Force India would be a good team for someone like Mick Schumacher to start off in Formula 1. Now, I'm not so sure. Because for someone to make the conscious decision of, yay, let's put Lance Stroll in the car, that'll be good for us. No, I'm sorry, that's a company that isn't making good decisions.
No, that's making decisions on emotions.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
He would be better off being in a Williams or a McLaren for his first drive.
Yeah.
Let's face it, if you Mick Schumacher and you have a pig's ear of the first season, you're going to get a second chance.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And at most of the teams, I think he'd get that. The problem is, I mean, the thing with Force India and Lance Stroll, though, is what would it take for him to be pushed out the seat? He could be in that seat for the next 10 years.
Until the team is sold. Yeah. Until his dad has figured out his son is never going to be a world champion and he's wasting his money.
Yeah. And even if he did spend the $2 billion to make it happen, it's not going to be worth the payback.
No, but the thing is, with Stroll's dad, it's just like him taking his son to watch a football match, but he's getting his son to play.
Yeah.
I mean, you would not see somebody buying Manchester United. Well, actually, let's not say Man United, because Force India are not going to win the title. But then again, Man United probably won't this season.
No, they won't.
No, but let's say you take a midfield, a mid of the table. Let's say Stoke, right? Okay, they've gone down this year. Maybe they're not a bad thing. Well, we use Stoke as Everton. someone buys Everton and then goes, I want my son to play because I bought the club. It doesn't quite work that way.
No, it doesn't, because the manager would go, okay, well, let's see if he's any good, and when they're in training and they realise, actually, you know what, he ain't good enough, he wouldn't play. That is exactly how it would be. Now, I don't know what Stroll had done in his previous formulas, but he's not shown anything that should keep him in Formula One.
Well, but in football, though, you'd have the fans going crazy saying, what a waste of money.
Yeah.
Or who the fuck do you think you are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
In Formula One, it doesn't matter what the fan or the supporters say. The supporters say about the team that they love. If there's a driver in there, it's not going to change the fact that he's going to still race for them.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, one other bit of news. Something that made our mother very, very happy, by the way. Jenson Button confirmed as joining Sky Sports for the whole of next season, which I think is a brilliant move by Sky, other than the fact that it adds another sausage to the barbecue. Do you think though that Sky are going to release somebody like Damon Hill by having Button in there? I did wonder that. Now,
because there's only so many pundits you can have there.
There is. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, okay, Simon Lazenby, he's the host. I don't like him. But then you've got Damon Hill, Johnny Herbert, Martin Brundle, Anthony Davidson, Paul di Resta. Who else? You got Ted, Natalie, Rachel. So that's 8 people, some of which are drivers.
And there's also the other guy that Ray. Is it Ray? No, James can't stand, the guy that does the snippets for
the Scottish guy, Craig Slater.
Craig Slater, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there was quite a few of them. Now, I could imagine. I thought maybe what'll happen is.
Oh, you forgot one.
Go on.
Crofty.
Oh yeah, Crofty. Yeah. I thought maybe Hill is getting on a bit now. May not want to go to all of the races. Maybe Hill and Herbert will separate a bit more of what they've been doing. From what I can gather, Johnny Herbert has been doing a lot of Formula 2 commentary this season, so maybe he'll perhaps do more of that next year and perhaps a little less of the F1. But then when you look at it, I mean, Sky have had Nico Rosberg join them a few times this season, although it's only been as like little snippets. So I could see them adding Button and keeping everybody else, but perhaps just reducing. So instead of having Hill and Herbert at the same race, they might have Hill at one and Herbert at another, with Button there every time. But
what do you think to the F3 joining the program? So basically, they'll be racing the same weekends as F1 at the same circuits as F2.
Well, I think that F2, F3 and F4 should all be racing. Well, I say should all be racing at the same circuit. Okay, maybe F4 not, because there are other racetracks around this country and other countries where they can race. But F2 definitely should. I mean, I think that F2 should be at every race that Formula 1 is at, personally. And if F3 is going to be joining them at the racetracks, then that's only even better. It means that there'll potentially be more grip on the track. It means that if you're a spectator, if you've got a weekend ticket, there's more racing for you to watch. It'll mean as a viewer, if you're at home, hopefully it'll be televised, so you'll get to see who these younger drivers are and if they are any good or not. So yeah, I'd say it's a good thing.
Do you know what I think they should do though? At the moment in Formula 2, it's split into 2 races. They have like a sprint race and a longer race, feature race. I think they should just do, the feature race. They should have qualifying in the feature race, and the feature race should be probably 75% distance as a Formula 1 race. Try and replicate Formula 1 for the driver's benefit, as much as possible. So bring in, if they're going to have multiple compounds in Formula 1, have them in F2 and 3.
Yeah.
Have the pit stops. Have it. Do it as similar as you can to Formula One. I know that you can't just replicate everything, but from a driver perspective, I think it would be good, and from a viewer's perspective, I think it would be easier to follow, because when you're trying to follow the F2 Championship and you go, hang on a minute, what's this mean? Race 2, we're 3/4 of the way through the season.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's race 2 of this weekend. It's like, what?
Yeah. Yes.
So it gets a bit confusing.
I'd agree with you there. It would make sense to have it more like. It also means, like you said, it'll help the drivers, because if they do have to make that step up into F1, they know exactly what the format's going to be. They know what the rules are. They know what the situation is, because it's what they would be used to. It would make that transition considerably easier, and all they then have to focus on is the cars. One thing I will say about Jenson Button though is, and I said this to our mum, I said I could see Jenson Button being the next Martin Brundle.
I'm not so. Maybe I'm not sure. I'm unsure.
Well, he's got a cheeky personality, and Brundle's kind of got that, and he knows what he's on. Whether he'd be any good at commentary, I don't know. Anthony Davidson is very good as a pundit on commentary, but to be fair, so is Paul di Resta.
Yeah, I would say that I see Anthony Davidson as the next.
Yeah.
Martin Brundle.
If, let's say, for example, Brundle was to say, right, I'm stopping now, Anthony Davidson could do that no problem, because he does he doesn't do all the practice sessions. He's done more than enough of the practice sessions to be able to jump in there, have a rapport, know what he's talking about.
He's done it when Martin Brundle's not been able to do an event because of illness or whatever.
Yeah. Paul di Resta has been very good on commentary this season, and he has stepped in a bit this season as well. So yeah, the future could be bright for them. I don't know about you though. I'm thinking we might have to stop. We've managed to waffle on for a couple of hours, quite surprisingly easier than I was expecting.
Yeah.
So I'll just read you something that something for James. You know how James loves his movies. I've seen
Yes.
a breaking story today about a new Disney movie that's been cancelled.
Right, it's not a Disney Star Wars, is it?
No. Al Sharpton reported today that Walt Disney's new film called Jet Black, the African-American version of Snow White, has been cancelled. All of the 7 dwarves, Dealer, Stealer, Mugger, Forger, Drive-By, Homeboy and Shank have refused to sing Hi-Ho because it offends black prostitutes. They also say they for sure have no intention of singing It's Off to Work We Go.
It's off to the dog queue.
Yeah, it's off to the dog queue. Anyway, right, we're going to need to do a little bit of housekeeping right now. Obviously, James hasn't been able to join us this evening, which is a shame, because obviously it is our last Formula One podcast of the year, and the season has ended. Now, the three of us have not yet sat down and had a chat about what we are going to do in the off-season, or even for next season. So that is something that we are going to have to do behind the scenes. What I will say is, though, one of the things that we may do in the Formula One off season is we're all us three are all gamers, bit of racing, bit of shooting. So it's possible we may do some video game podcasts on a Tuesday and live stream some video gaming. But there's no guarantees of that's what we'll do, because we need to sit down, have a chat, and work out what it is that we are going to do. So for anyone that's wanting to know what we will do, you just have to give us a bit of time to find out. Go on, you're laughing.
Yeah. Well, I just remembered, I might as well say this now, we took James on a new game, didn't we?
Yeah.
And oh yeah, I know these controls are the same as Battlefield.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I've chucked a grenade at myself.
and he died. I was actually meant to. I did record the video clip and save it, and I totally forgot to put it together to show. I wonder if that's why James hasn't joined us tonight. So they'll take the piss out of me because he killed myself.
No, he'll be practicing for Thursday's race in the league that we run.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get shown up.
So yeah, folks, keep an eye out on the YouTube channel for what we're going to do. Steve, opportunity for you to plug your racing league.
Yeah, Dynamic GT League. It's on the PlayStation 4 using Gran Turismo Sport. We're currently doing a Group 4 championship. I think we're on to race 7 of 9. So all thoughts are already starting to go towards the next season and what car we're going to be using. So if you're interested, drop us a message on the YouTube chat, or send us a message on PlayStation, which is, just trying to remember what my PSN name is, DGT League _SGP or _SRI. Send us a message, say that you're interested, and we'll see if we can get you involved.
Yep, and you can check out their YouTube channel for race videos as well. Okay, just to finish off then, I'm going to say doing the podcast this season has been it's been interesting, that's for sure. I know myself, Steve and James over the course of the year have had our own personal ups and downs, but either way it has still been, well, I say ups and downs, and James has had multiple teeth out. It has been interesting to do these podcasts, and hopefully if we are able to continue them for next season, we may even be able to introduce a few more of James's funny stories as well, and you never know, Hando may return. But in the meantime, I'm going to say it's goodbye from him and it's goodbye from me. Thank you everyone for listening in and tuning in. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, send us messages if you wish. And if you have been enjoying the I'll Tell You What TV podcasts, hit that like button, definitely. Alright Steve, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem, I can go for a shit now.
Yep. And James, thank you very much for joining us. Alright, that's it. You're not here. But no, it has been a pleasure, and it is a shame that James isn't here this evening. Anyway, also quick shout out as well to a few of the guests that we have had over the course of this season. Ray, a friend of ours and a co-host or co-owner of the racing league that Steve's involved in. Jeroen Kvekel joined us on podcast as well. Kev Brooks joined us. And thank you to all of the listeners. Paul. The pink car, as he put it, or the red car, Paul, full of knowledge of Formula 1, but it was interesting anyway. So yeah, thank you very much. Make sure you have a good December, folks, and a good Christmas, and a Happy New Year, just in case we're not back on before then. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
See you later.
Blah 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 blah.